Well, hey there again. This is Steve Ellis with Quest Ministries, trying to tackle a number of questions that people are raising. These are great questions that rise up in our conversations when people start talking about faith, about God, about life, about religion. We've tackled a number of these questions here on our online course called I'm Glad You Asked. And today we're tackling another one that pops up a lot in conversation. What about all the hypocrites you find in churches? You know, the ones that say one thing and do another. They look all spiritual and nice and religious on Sundays in churches, but Monday through Friday, they're just living a totally different life. What about all the hypocrites in church? Some would say, well, that invalidates Christianity. If that's what it means to be a Christian, I certainly don't want anything to do with that. Hypocrites invalidate Christianity. Another position we'll look at is, well, they're there, but they do not invalidate Christianity. That's what we're going to try to look at here today. So what about all the hypocrites in church? First of all, I'd like to begin with a very honest admission. Hypocrisy is a real problem. You cannot deny that hypocrisy exists in the church. It's there, but there are all kinds of sources and forms of hypocrisy. For example, there are a lot of people who attend church for the wrong reasons. In fact, they may not even be Christians attending a Christian church. A lot of people attend large gatherings of people for social reasons. It makes them feel good. It relieves their guilt. But they may not necessarily be practicing Christianity, so we can't expect them to live the life Monday through Saturday. Another possible source of hypocrisy is there are Christians attending who are trying to pretend to be more spiritual than reality. Well, why would they do that? Well, no one likes to admit that they've got problems in their life. No one likes to admit they're not really living all the tenets of the faith, but they're pretending when they're together, but during the week they don't necessarily live up to that. Another source would be that there are a lot of people, Christians even, that revere the doctrine or the teaching about Christianity more than the application of that truth to their life. In other words, they've got tremendous head knowledge about Christianity, the Bible, and things like that, but they're not putting it into practice in their own personal life. And so again, they live an inconsistent life. And certainly one source would be there are ministers, priests, even rabbis who fail to practice what they stand up and they preach on a regular basis. They get up in their pulpits and they say one should live this way, but they have yet to do that in their life. And certainly we've seen those in spiritual leadership in our country who've committed moral failure and are hypocrites on profile. And finally, there would be those people who fail to keep solemn vows that they've made in church. Somebody stands up at a wedding or a baptism or some other special occasion and they make a vow before the Lord, but they failed to keep that, and people point the finger later when they don't do it and say they're a hypocrite. Yes, hypocrisy is a real problem in the church. However, wherever you find hypocrisy in other realms, it does not invalidate the real thing. For example, you know, in the medical profession, we have these people called quacks or fake doctors. They hang a shingle out. They say they're a certain kind of doctor. They prescribe medicine. Even some perform surgery, but they've never been trained. They're not prepared to even do that. They're pretending to be a doctor. But the reality of quacks and fake doctors does not invalidate the medical profession. We still have good doctors that do the right thing. Another example would be money. There's a thing called counterfeit money. Thieves print it up and try to pass it on as the real thing and make a lot of illegal money. But the presence of counterfeit money does not invalidate legal tender. Hypocrisy in other realms does not invalidate the real thing. It should not necessarily do that when it comes to Christianity. Let's define what hypocrisy truly is. Simply this, that you are pretending to be something that you are not. That would be a good working definition of hypocrisy. But in Christianity, to become a Christian requires just the opposite. One's got to admit honestly who they are. And what is that initial admission? That we are imperfect people. We are sinful. We are flawed, imperfect. We need help. We must come to God and admit that and allow Him to give us forgiveness for our imperfection, our sin, and then begin the path of Christianity. So to become a Christian is just the opposite of hypocrisy. And as you live the Christian life, one continues to admit that we sin, we mess up, and we need to come back for help. So I would say there are many false assumptions concerning hypocrisy in the church. I think one of them would be profession. In other words, stating that you're a Christian does not necessarily mean possession of the Christian life. Many people can stand up and say they are anything. They can claim to be a Christian. They can claim to be a super Christian. But that doesn't necessarily mean they possess that reality. What you say does not necessarily mean you have that thing. A second false assumption is that the Christian life is not, I repeat, not about being perfect, but it's about progression, about moving daily in the direction of getting better and better and more like Jesus Christ. It's not about perfection. It's about progression. And finally, I would say that all hypocrisy is certainly a sin, but notice, not all sin is hypocrisy. There's provision in the Christian life as we grow that when we find out we have messed up, we've sinned, we've fallen short, we can come to God, we can admit, confess our sin, and find His forgiveness. We're not pretending any longer. We're simply saying we need help again. So all hypocrisy is a sin when you're pretending, but not all sin is hypocrisy. So what are we saying here? Hypocrisy does not necessarily invalidate Christianity. In fact, the founder of Christianity, Jesus Christ, denounced hypocrisy. He spent an inordinate amount of time talking about the hypocrites of his day, the scribes and the Pharisees. A whole chapter, Matthew 23, talks about it. Here's an example. He said, "Woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you're like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside, they're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of," here's the word, "hypocrisy and lawlessness." Jesus Christ decried, denounced hypocrisy. It's not anything Jesus Christ wants to tolerate. So hypocrisy does not invalidate Christianity. Here's the reality. Christianity stands on the person of Christ and not on the performance of Christians. Christians are going to mess up, but the truth, the validity of Christianity stands on the finished work of Jesus Christ, the person of Christ. And so one last thing I would say to you is, don't let the sins of others, don't let hypocrisy of others keep you from a relationship with someone, namely Jesus Christ, who you agree with. He agrees with you. Hypocrisy is wrong. Don't let the hypocrites that you can point out in churches come between you and somebody you agree with and someone who agrees with you. You're on the same page. Gee, I hope this has helped you in your pursuit of figuring out these tough questions. We've covered many in previous sessions. We'll cover a few more in this online class we call I'm Glad You Asked. Hope you'll be with us in further sessions. But for now, this is Steve Ellis saying goodbye.